All right, this is a bit of a long-winded introduction to get to my topic, so bear with me a bit, but it's my podcast and I'll do what I want with it, even if most people will probably drop off by now. But recently, I heard there's a Beatles biopic in the works, and as a fan of the Beatles, naturally, I look into it, and supposedly the director Sam Mendes has 4 Beatles movies in the works, each one of them following a different member of the band. And if you don't know who Sam Mendes is, he's directed some amazing movies like American Beauty, 1917, and then 2 of the most recent Bond films as well, Spectre and Skyfall. So now, knowing this, I am very interested at this point. And again, naturally, I take the next step and look into who's playing these leading roles of the Beatles, because quite some big shoes to fill, if I may say. But the actors rumored to be locked in for the roles are Harris Dickinson as John Lennon, Paul Mescal as Paul McCartney, Charlie Rowe as George Harrison, and Barry Keoghan as Ringo Starr. Outside of Barry, I know none of these guys, which to me, side note, is very refreshing. I'm tired of seeing the same, fucking 10 dudes just interchanged in all of these big major box office movies. But regardless, long story short, I start looking into these guys, and I start with Paul Mescal because his name has come up pretty frequently since he's going to be starring in the new Gladiator sequel. Now, this is where the real podcast introduction begins. I felt that backstory was kind of necessary for some reason, but I find a show starring Paul on Hulu from 2020 called Normal People. 1 week, 12 episodes later, and I can confidently say I am even more excited for these Beatles biopics because this band just put on an absolute show. The story follows this couple basically through high school and college, and you kind of just witness how they evolve and all the turmoil in their relationship. But one theme, I guess you can call it, from the show is how people just mature and peak at different times in their lives. You know how you can always think of those people who peaked in high school, or the ones who really just thrived in college, or maybe as they got a career under their belt, they started to peak around their 30s through their 50s. Let's call those the George Clooney's, right? Or you could even be the Betty Whites of the world, who you've never even seen a picture of, younger than 60 years old, and she just basically thrived in her golden years. But what defines a peak? Is it peak beauty, peak intelligence, peak wealth, or is it a specific combination? Is it something you base your feelings off of, is a time when you experience peak happiness? So I started looking into this, and I found this article that breaks down a bunch of different studies and surveys to expand on your peak ages throughout your life. So I thought it'd be interesting to kind of go over these today. But we'll start with our early life peaks and then move through our golden years. Starting out at ages 7 to 8, this is the peak time to learn a second language. It is generally known that it is easier to adopt this prior to puberty, which is pretty interesting. At 18 years old, your brain processing power peaks then. Supposedly, there's a test called the digit symbol coding test, where you equate a number with a certain symbol. Then you are given a string of numbers, and you need to convert them to the correct symbols. And according to a 2016 study, on average, 18-year-olds were the best at this. But just 5 years later, you're already forgetting someone's name. A 2010 study demonstrated the ability to remember unfamiliar names peaks at the age of 22. So that's not too far off. But fear not, because there are many peaks remaining in your 20s. So don't worry about it. You're going to be okay. For example, an online dating site compiled a bunch of user information and found that men find women in their early 20s most attractive. And even as men get older, their preferred preference stays the same. While women in their 20s preferred a slightly older man, and as they got older into their 30s, they tended to like men a few years younger than them. This is, pretty on par, I think, as far as society's views go, though, right? The next one kind of shocked me, though. A panel of more than 130,000 people in Germany found that life satisfaction for most people peaks in their early 20s and more specifically at the age of 23. This is because at this age, people often are the most optimistic about their future, which is driven just by like high aspirations and expectations. Typically, as you get older, your expectations lower a bit and so does your satisfaction, but life satisfaction picks up again later in life when people kind of adjust these aspirations and kind of, accept life for what it is. But to round out your 20s and kind of creep into your 30s here, this is when you're in peak physical condition, specifically around the ages of 20 and 35 years old, which to me, I find very encouraging to know that I've still got hopefully a few good years still left in me, because by 29, I've already thrown my back out a few times, and every time I bend over, my knees crack like I'm just an 80-year-old man, which is not great. I saw your bones are their strongest and densest when you're 30 years old, so this might be it for me. I'm trying to get that extra vitamin D, but I don't know, in general, milk kind of grosses me out. I remember one time specifically, I was just blazed out of my mind eating a chocolate chip cookie with some milk, and my wife made a comment about what milk actually is, and she specifically used the word secretion. And ever since then, it's just never really settled with me. I'll never forget it. I still add like milk and protein shakes and will eat it with like cereal, but I'm never just downing a full glass of milk without this conversation popping into my head. Anyways, as you shift into your 30s, 40s, and 50s, this is generally where you're going to see your intelligence, career, and income all peak. Scientists wanted to study how intelligence progresses with age. So they studied chess grandmasters, which I thought was pretty interesting. And by looking at all of their scores and ages, it was determined that on average, players who performed their best were 31 years old. And to piggyback off that, the average age when Nobel Prize winning research is done is 40 years old. The only outlier here in terms of intelligence is that your arithmetic skills peak at 50 years old. If there's one thing I know, though, it is that I am not a numbers person. I got by, but the second I didn't need that information anymore, just went right out. People who can turn numbers into percentages just on the spot are wizards to me. As far as salaries go, women earn the most around their mid-40s, whereas men tend to reach their peak salaries around mid-50s. But this is also when you begin to hit that life satisfaction decline. But it's not all downhill from there. As I mentioned earlier, you hit a second kind of bump in life satisfaction around the age of 69, and there are a few reasons for this. First, you've seen enough by now where your life expectations are pretty realistic. You're not having to deal with the harsh reality of not accomplishing those outlandish 20-year-old aspirations that were just a little too far out of reach. Second, with these unmet aspirations, you generally have less regrets because with age, people develop better coping mechanisms and have a greater sense of acceptance regarding the paths that they've taken in life. Next, this older demographic begins to also shift their focus and prioritize social and emotional goals over material and career-related ambitions, which can enhance your overall well-being. And lastly, they have greater psychological resilience. Older people they've seen some shit, right? I mean, they've walked to school miles uphill both ways in the rain and snow, so they've been through it. But they're able to handle stress and negative emotions more effectively, allowing them to have a more positive outlook on life. However, one interesting thing to note is this phenomenon known as the nine-ender effect. So people who reach the ages ending in 29, 39, 49 are more likely to engage in significant self-reflection and existential questioning, which I can definitely relate to. I turn 30 next year, and it's hard not to compare yourself with your youthful thought of where you thought you'd be at 30 years old. If you were to ask a 18-year-old what 30 would be like, they're like, oh, that's old as fuck. These people probably have their lives together. They've got it all figured out. But no, I feel like I still have no fucking clue what I'm doing. Overall, though, at 29, I do have an optimistic outlook for my 30s. But yeah, I don't know what I'm doing. If you were to ask me now, though, what peak me will be, I can confidently say that it's still ahead of me. I feel like I've been just awkwardly trying to make my way through life up to this point, but I think I'm starting to get a hold of things, thank God. Late 30s for me overall, I think will be a good peak for me to shoot for, but I don't know. We'll have to see. This really did make me think, though, that in maybe the next few months, I should have a hard look at my aspirations so I don't get this crazy life satisfaction slump in the next 20 years. Like, I should really think this through, maybe write some of these down so I could really think about what's realistic for me to accomplish the rest of my life. Anyways, besides my inability to probably learn a second language and remember unfamiliar names, there is a lot to look forward to, even at 29, I feel like. I mean, hopefully I'll get smarter, I'll make some more money, my life priorities will shift a bit, hopefully enhancing my overall well-being. But most importantly, these Beatle biopics have a lot of potential, which is very exciting, I think. But thank you for listening. I appreciate it. I hope your peak years are still ahead of you as well. If they're not, I don't know what to tell you. This isn't much of a motivational kind of thing I'm doing here. Go listen to a commencement speech or something. But yeah, I hope we can maybe figure it out together. So in the meantime, I will talk to you next week.